Good evening. Welcome to the RSU 14 Wyndham Raymond School District Board of Directors. This is September 17th and it is now 6:30. And could I please have a roll call?
You sure can. Kate Britz.
Here.
Eric Colby.
Present.
Jennifer Fleck.
Here.
Diana Forsling.
Here.
Marge Gavoni.
Here.
Pete Hensler.
Here.
Jen Moore.
Here.
Don Dillon. Jerry Keene Dwyer.
Here.
Diana Maciel.
That's everyone. If you could join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, first thing on the agenda is we have adjustments to the agenda. What I'd like to add at this point in time, and it won't be for a vote at this, is to bring up the question. I sent it out, and some people might not have had time to see it. A little while back, I had not disbanded the middle school advisory committee when they had finished their charge and it reported out to us in June. I thought it would be a reasonable thing to keep them in case there was a reason to give them another charge. Since then, we have, of course, put our actions for the middle school committee and what we are doing with their recommendations on a temporary hold while we do the cost sharing. After conferring with Kate, our policy chair, I think we came to the decision that we should probably take a vote at our next meeting if everyone agrees that we disband them because they have met the charge, and if we were ever to activate them again, we would have to vote on a new charge anyway. And so if I could have a head nod on whether people agree with that, I'll put it on the meeting for the first meeting in October, which would be October 1st. If anybody has any thoughts on it, speak up. So can we kind of like get a thumbs up, which is not a vote, or down? Okay. Okay, I think everybody's agreed on that. So, Mr. Prince, we'll have that on the agenda for the beginning. And I have spoken to the chair of that committee, and so Katrina, she is aware of what's going on. Okay, public participation. Seeing as our public consists of our presenters, I guess we can close public participation and we can go right into our first I was going to say application. No, wrong thing. Yeah, I know. First item on the agenda, which is our proficiency-based diploma extension application and blueprint overview. Christine Hessler, our curriculum director, is here.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I passed out a folder to each of you that are various different colors tonight because as of 5 o'clock tonight, the deadline was due at the Department of Education for the diploma extension application. There are 3 dates, and one was in August, this is September and October, and ours application was filed yesterday, so we are all set. What is in that folder is the application in full. I wanted you to have the opportunity to read through it. There is nothing new on there that we haven't discussed before, but I wanted you to see the process that the department is asking us to do. So you have that entire document to read through. One of the things that they asked is evidence of preparedness, which in our application talks about our vision and our mission, our strategic plan, what we've done to uphold that, and talked about the progress we've made so far towards proficiency base. We feel very fortunate in the RSU that we've been doing this work for about 2 to 3 years. So we're well prepared and continuing on this journey. But those are the pieces that they're asking us for. What we did in the application was we also have to provide evidence for each of these pieces. So for example, some of the places you'll see are linked evidence of the proficiency-based video we used on opening day, where staff talked about the change that we're undergoing. We linked some of Mr. Prince's pieces about our timeline that we've done. So they want you to show as much as you can to kind of make your statement about why the option is that you chose. And in RSU 14, as when I was here last time, we chose option 3, extension 3, because we feel it's right in line with what we believe in, is that our K-8 schools will be aligned before we move it to the high school. And that's the work that we're currently doing. So for this process, we are updating the state with what we've done in the past, what our implementation plan is, and what our plans is to move forward. So everything is here for you. I apologize when you actually put it all together with the attachments. It's 46 pages. It is very lengthy, but I wanted you to have that. The attachments are not in your folder. If you take a quick look at the screen, you'll see this roughly, I apologize, taped web page. Address for you. I will have Cindy Kenny also send it out to you. This is a site called Symbaloo, and on each of these tiles I attached the attachments that I sent to the DOE, and I did it in a way so that if you wanted to see just an example of the high school work, you could click on that tile and it will open up to the document. You can download them, print them, do what you wish for them, but it's a way to organize all that information. So you also have an electronic copy of the documents I gave you tonight. You have a copy of the strategic plan, and you have copies that just disappeared, but all the pieces that we faxed to the DOE, so you can see all the actual attachments. It is one big pile, so instead of killing a bunch of trees, I wanted you to be able to access that piece. So that is often sent. I've spoken with the DOE, and if they have any clarifying questions, they'll let us know within 30 days. We'll clarify anything we need to, and hopefully be on our way. At the end of the year, I would anticipate we will be doing a reflection, talking about the plans we laid for this year, and reporting what we have done and what we're looking for the next part. The other side of your folder explains what the administrative team did when we went on retreat this summer at the end of June. This is the blueprint. It looks a little bit different from years past. We were put through a process with Great Schools Partnership, and we adopted their template. We really liked it because it also identifies some other areas, key people, coordination. It really had us nail down some of the things to make our work come alive. I think you know us well by now that we're always keeping this in the forefront for all of us. But right now we have 4 strands or 4 action plans that we're in place. One of them is defining and clarifying expectations for students K to 12. Those are our content area curriculum groups, and you will see that we have identified our graduation standards and performance indicators at the high school. We're moving all those down into the K to 8 level. Those groups are up and running, and actually in one of the attachments there's a grid that will share with you where we are with each content area. So this blueprint walks through the expectations that we know that in proficiency-based, we cannot operate without clear targets for teachers and for students and for community, and that's the work that this blueprint actually covers. So this is our year-long work with that piece. The second one, or another one, is assessment literacy. And here's what we're doing is to identify the professional development that we need to do to staff, making sure that we have student progress and academics moving through the system, so that students have an assessment plan that masters the standards and that we can show and certify that they are in fact proficient in those areas. So this is another chunk of our work that we've mapped out as we go through, and it also identifies what evidence we're looking for and the timeline that we've set for so far. Another one is to develop a communication plan, and this is the one that we really are focusing on, is how do we get this information out to community? We talk about it here at the board. A few of us attended a session and really were given some different ideas of how to engage parents to come and meet and have these conversations. We're doing them at individual schools. But how do we also get to every community member that maybe doesn't have a child in school that should understand what's happening in the RSU? This was a really neat piece for us. On opening day, if you attended, you were able to hear a clear mission and statement and strategic plan from Superintendent Prince. Again, I mentioned we created a video involving students and parents, students and teachers, and identifying how the change has happened and what they're seeing and sharing. That is also linked on our home webpage through Eduvision. You can check out our opening day video. It came out really well, and it's nice to stop and capture some of the moments sometimes. So that's something we're trying to do. We're also having Task Group 1 will be coming back together, and they're the group that really are the vision keepers. And so we're actually going to give them one of these blank templates, and we're asking them to help us identify. So now that we have these great plans in place and we're identifying standards, what are the instructional practices that need to change so that they can help us understand what is it you need to change what you're doing in your classroom in order to meet these rigorous standards and track kids through our grading and reporting system part. So I will be coming back to you later with another blueprint when that group convenes and when they've kind of mapped out some pieces for the rest of the year. The last one is building structures for collaborative practice. That's really working on each of our buildings have professional learning groups or professional learning communities, and how do we keep the work of proficiency based in those committees? How can we support them? How do we keep track of who's doing what so that we can share resources across the RSU? So each of these action steps will outline for you the ideas that we have as an administrative team, what we feel we need to cover in order to keep this vision alive and be able to meet the 3-year deadline for the state. I think the other piece to keep in mind is sometimes we come across something in the middle of the year that's a great opportunity, and we'll grab it and go and we'll readjust our blueprint. And I think that's one of the neat things by coming so often. I can kind of give you those quick updates and stuff. So. But this, again, is a blueprint. It's where we would like to head. It helps us stay focused on the work ahead of us so it doesn't kind of sit in a drawer. It's living and breathing, and we bring it up at A-team and principals meetings. And we wanted to share that information with you. So does anyone have any questions of anything? Yeah, Jennifer.
Yeah, I'm just curious, when you're defining and clarifying expectations, what kind of benchmarks are you using? Where are you looking to see what you should be expecting at each grade level?
Through the curriculum work?
Yeah.
We have a set of graduation standards that the high school has set, and what we've done is taken those standards and we've been able to stretch them down to K, and at the K2 level we've actually added foundational standards. And so we actually look at it as a roadmap of where kids have checkpoints along the way. So in the proficiency-based work, we've identified end of 2nd grade performance indicators, end of 5th, end of 8th, and high school. There are grade level targets in there as well, but that's the big chunk of work that we're doing first, and then we'll have some assessments built in. So as kids are moving along, it's kind of like a bus stop, checking in where you are. What do you need? Do you need to move forward, or do we need to back up a little to help you? And we want to have a consistent thread all the way from K all the way up to high school, so that we're all aligned as we go through. So
Do you compare then to other districts, how is it that you came up with sort of the starting point for graduation standards maybe?
We started with the national standards, your main state learning results. We looked at Common Core. We looked at all the national documents, and we also worked with our great school partnership coach, Angela Hardy, and they have a set of exemplar documents that they've been working with schools all around New England. So what we did, because we just don't take anybody else's stuff, is we kind of laid everything out on the table and said, what do we expect in RSU 14? What is the best thing we feel is for our students to leave really ready for the next step, either college or career ready, and determined this is the end point. And from the end point, we come all the way down. So, and in the process that we've done, what's been really exciting is watching our primary teachers really understand now that we're connected to those kids that graduate. And I know Chris Howell has always said it, that he gets to shake the hand of every graduate. He said, but every teacher from kindergarten on should be standing there because they helped in that journey of that student. Mm-hmm. So people are really, which is neat about this work is that wow, it really does matter what I do in kindergarten and I do in 1st grade. Mm-hmm. Because in order for this child to stay on the path of success, we need to get them there. So, and we're doing all 8 content areas. So
thank you.
We're moving forward. That's great.
lot of work. Boy, this is the least I think we've ever.
You're saving them all for
You
him,
are.
aren't you?
You're thorough. You are
Thank you.
definitely, I think, very, very thorough. And I think it's probably going to take a little bit of time for everybody to read.
Correct.
through all of
And
this
as you're reading and
digest it.
digesting, please feel free to ask questions. I, welcome the opportunity to come back and discuss this in public, but this is our journey, and as much as we're asking teachers to be transparent about what we're teaching, we also want to be transparent about what we're doing with the community, and I think that's really key. And we're on a journey, so it's not perfect, but here's where we are tonight, and when things change, we'll come back and let you know.
Marge.
So.
Kate, please speak up.
I'm sorry, I lied. I do have a question.
Okay.
And it's more, not the journey that you're taking, but some of the stuff that's embedded within it. And Pete and I just had a little side talk just 5 minutes ago about Common Core and a lot of information that we've been receiving as board members and individually about people questioning the Common Core.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you could speak to that.
And I'm in a
Do you want
community,
to?
and I will. I can answer it as a mom as well. I'll have people who will ask on the soccer field and will say to me, "Well, what's all this hubbub about Common Core, and should they be teaching that to our kids?" And my response is, "Do you want your child to learn how to read and to write and to do mathematics?" And they said, "Well, yes." I'm like, "Well, that is Common Core." I said it was formed by a group of individuals who were also teachers, administrators, and for some reason, because we as a nation have decided that we want to have a same set, it's become this political arena piece. And so people are really doubting, should we have it? Are they micromanaging? They're state standards, and we decide how those become interpreted. But if you look at them, why wouldn't you want your child to be be able to interpret textual knowledge at a high level? It's preparing students to go along the way. I mean, our journey is, we're trying to prepare kids for when they leave us, for career and for college. And the Common Core gives us some opportunities to really stretch the rigor of what we're asking kids to do. And again, are we adopting it verbatim? No, because it's huge. But we're deciding on those threads that we feel are really important when kids leave the RSU, that they're well prepared. And we owe it to our kids to give them the best instruction and to hold that bar really high for them. I mean, that's my take on it. I don't understand the political piece because I'm kind of busy doing other stuff. Dawn always kind of laughs at me, but that's what that is. If you sit down and really read what Common Core is, it's a set of standards to get our kids from K to 12 in English language arts and mathematics, and it scaffolds every year for you. So
I think we need to be mindful of the chatter that's going on, the negative chatter, because I'm hearing a lot of it,
Yeah.
and although I'm in a different role than maybe a parent is, we have to sell this
Yep.
if we really believe in it, and we have to really clearly explain this component of it, because
Okay.
there's quite a bit of talk out there of states opting out,
correct.
and it's in the papers, and
Yeah.
I want our credibility to be A+,
Yeah.
and that we believe in what we're doing, and this is why.
And this I belong to a Southern Maine curriculum group, and this topic has come up. They've had parents and they've had that discussion, and I think that if people have questions, they need to ask. And I think when we have our curriculum and it's transparent, look at it. If you have questions, ask us. If you don't feel what we're doing is right to prepare students, then we need to know that. But I hate to have people down it because the word Common Core is attached to some of the national standards that we're looking at to devise our curriculum for RSU 14.
Is there
So-
anywhere on our site or whatever, what is Common Core? I mean, if I were a parent,
I don't believe so, but maybe there are some pieces out there that we could link. There's some really short little videos that talk about just that, what is Common Core? And it will give you the process of who created it and what it was used for and pieces like that.
because and I've said this many times, my eyes kind of roll back too with all this alphabet soup and these and acronyms and the whole ball of wax, and this is a whole new ball game, and we have to be very careful that I love this phrase because I didn't make it up, that we're clear and effective communicators.
Yeah.
I know, it really
We're
is.
gonna talk about it.
Oh, really?
See?
See, I've got the party line, but in any event, I
Yeah.
think that's a huge component of the communication.
Yeah. Thanks, Kate. I'll look into some pieces and I'll put it on the site and then let people know.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
And I think also, to piggyback on that, it has to be brought down so it's very simplistic, because I think a lot of people don't ask questions because they don't know what to ask.
Right.
That's a very good point.
They have no idea. It's,
You don't know what you don't know?
And that's the reaction I get when I talk to parents. They're like, "Oh, that's what it means," and I'm like, "Yeah, that's what it is. It's teaching kids how to learn and read and spell and write." And they're like, "Oh, okay." Like, so there is a lot of misconception out there.
Is there a flow chart that exists? Because I've been thinking about this recently. There's been so many initiatives, you know, starting with the learning results in 1997, then we did this, and then we did that, and then we did this, and then we did that. Is there a simple little flow chart that exists that kind of gives the history
Of the stand.
of our journey?
Oh, I don't. You know what? I don't know.
yeah.
I don't know, but that would be helpful, I think, to.
It would be helpful to me because sometimes I forget, well, did we, you know, what?
Right. Where are we? And what's happening now? I mean, I
Right.
think that's a good piece. So.
Okay.
March, I've got a new set. Well, I'm gonna add in since Kate opened it up, but Common Core around the nation, there's some of our teachers that are going against that as well. So political, I don't know, it sounds like it may be, you know, regional or whatever. I think the important thing to think of is it's not so much what you call it, it's how you implement it. And it sounds to me that you're looking at it very carefully and you're implementing what you're implementing with care. So I think that's important. So, because, and the other part of it is we're kind of in it because the state said we're in it.
Right.
So we've got to do that to maintain our funding and
Correct.
to go forward.
Right.
And that's a good point that I don't know that a lot of people are aware of, that it is state mandated.
It is state mandated.
And we got to do what they say.
And what we're doing is working really hard so that it fits what's best for kids in RSU 14. I mean, that's the bottom line.
That's the important part, that
Yep.
you're breaking it down and look at what's going to work
Right.
there.
Yeah, and I think if we can get it on our website,
Yeah.
I think it has to be easily accessible. I mean, because it's very difficult to maneuver because you're not sure, okay, like what section do I look under? So
Right.
it has to be almost a thing unto its own that's just like right there, like right on the front page or
It's a great
somewhere.
idea.
So people don't have to dig for it, because I've noticed
Right,
that
exactly.
in any of that, you can go into any town, even towns, not just the schools,
Right.
and it's kind of like, okay, where do I look? You know,
Right.
so for easy access.
All right, the floodgates are open.
Open season.
All right, so as the curriculum director,
Yes.
are there parts of the state mandate for our educational standards? Are there parts that you wish weren't there? Because a lot of what I'm hearing is that both from parents and from teachers, that the kids are being over-assessed.
Yeah. And we had that conversation last spring. This fall, we don't have kneecap. It's the first fall where our kids are not being inundated with tests to start the year off. We have to take the Smarter Balance Assessment, which is going to be held in a window the last 12 weeks of school. So that is we don't have a choice on that piece. We have to take that assessment. As far as what we assess in the RSU, this year we're only testing NWEA in grades 2 and 3. We're trying to back off of what assessments we need to do. The ones that we're choosing are very carefully chosen. They don't take a lot of time, but they're very effective to find out where kids are. So we look at that very, very carefully.
So
So-
if Maine was to opt out, one of the states that opt out of Common Core, going forward, like how would our curriculum model many aspects of it going forward and just, you know, pick and choose and maybe not over-assess? But I mean, there's parts of it that I'm assuming that you would want to.
Absolutely. We're choosing what we believe is whether Common Core flies out the window or not. We still have set standards we want every student in RSU 14 to leave with, whether they're tagged Common Core or not. If you look at some of the wording, they're the same. Some of the wording is the same as the main learning results. I mean, those are the pieces that are really good instructional practices. Common Core isn't some brand new thing that just fell off the earth. It's really rich, deep researched instructional practices that people need to have. And it's asking kids to do more. And that's the piece that scares some people, is do we really, should we, and it's not necessarily in our state, because I think that we have a really high bar, but in other states, they just don't want that piece. I mean, I talked to people from a couple different states at a conference, and they really don't believe that they need to have kids leaving at a certain level. And that's their culture, it's where they are, but I don't know, Pete, I just think that I don't think a lot would change for us, because we're putting this work together because it's meaningful for kids and it's preparing them. So.
Well, I guess I hope we're careful of saying that before this came out, that we were unpreparing kids, and this was the
Right.
magic bullet, because we've had a lot of magic bullets over the years. That's all that I want to be careful of. I guess if we're going to say that, we would have to say what was our old curriculum level and what's our new level for each grade, if it's that much more
Right.
rigorous and better, but that's all I want to say.
I'm trying to connect the dots.
Okay.
Common Core,
Mhm.
mandated by the state. So then what can we as a district tweak? Must we accept the entire template of the standards, or then it comes to us and we can make it our own?
And that's what we're doing.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
yeah, that's what we're doing. If you were to teach, I believe, Chris, if you could help me with this, if you were to teach everything in the Common Core, we would need to have kids in school 23 years to cover everything.
It almost took me that long.
Yes, you can come up. I know you're dying to come up. He's over here itching.
I just think there's one important distinction to make, is that, first of all, Common Core was adopted by the state of Maine in 2011 as the Maine Learning Results. If you open the Maine Learning Results are the Common Core. They're the same document. It's public law that is the curriculum of the land. And so, that is the curriculum that is expected to then be taught in Maine schools. Christine has brought a great point, which has been part of our process. So when it comes to diploma law, when it comes to the extension, we get to make the local determination as to level of proficiency and to what standards that we're going to hold our students accountable to for graduation standards. We have that ability, and then we also have that ability to kind of look at things through the process to see how are we scaffolding, how are we building as we go. In Maine, actually with Common Core, it's a copyrighted document. It was adopted in Maine pretty much wholesale, and you can basically, it's my understanding, change about 10% of Common Core and still call it Common Core. If the state chooses to change it beyond that, it's no longer Common Core, and it no longer falls under the materials. The Commissioner's Office has pulled together a stakeholder group to try to answer some of the questions that we've heard tonight, which is what's the clarity, and does the Common Core provide college and career readiness for students? That committee is expecting to do a report for end of October for the Commissioner's Office and for the Governor, to try to understand for the state of Maine, is this the right direction for Maine to go in? So just a few other pieces.
You gonna tell them that you're on the committee? No. We are well represented with Mr. Howell, and Pender Macon is also on that committee. So there'll be more to come, I guarantee.
That's great. Any more questions? Thoughts? See, you almost got away quickly.
It's okay.
But it's good information,
and
and
this
questions
is-
that need to be asked and answered.
Absolutely, and that's what we need to do. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
I want to make, and I'm sorry, thank you, Pete, I should have caught this sooner. This agenda item and the next one, there is no vote on, so if you could cross it
We're in
off.
favor. We're in favor.
Okay, saying that, we have the principal of Wyndham High School, Mr. Chris Howell, here to speak about the capstone proficiency diploma and give us an update.
Thanks, sir. Thank you.
she has everything.
I stopped a little bit.
Before I get started, I just want to first of all start by complimenting Christine and for all of her hard work and keeping much of this work together. She has done an absolutely fantastic job making sure that we truly are a system in the RSU so that students who are coming to Wyndham High School have the opportunity to learn and also have the opportunity to be challenged and also have the opportunity to receive the instruction that they need in order to be prepared. And she's doing a fantastic job with all those different pieces, and also is doing a great job with, I had a chance to read through the application for the proficiency-based extension, and it truly captured the work that has been done in this district since consolidation. And she did a fantastic job writing that and really should be commended. It was a tremendous amount of work and really captured what the extension process was all about, which was for districts to stop and pause and to see exactly where they're at. And Christine really should be commended for that work. So tonight is an opportunity to talk a little bit about Capstone. And for those of you who are new to the board, I think the last time we had a chance to have a public meeting about Capstone was probably 2 years ago. And much has happened in the last 2 years, much of which has been the discussion of tonight, which is a proficiency-based diploma. And some things that we weren't even really on the radar yet became on the radar for the last 2 years and really have pushed our work. And so tonight is an opportunity to talk about something that I'm hoping that will appear in new graduation policy. And the policy committee will have the opportunity to start looking at some possible policies for a proficiency-based diploma in the very, very near future. And again, this is one component that I would actually love to see and will push to see within that policy. Really what a capstone is about is, you think about it like a final project. And specifically for Wyndham High School, we're looking to head in a direction where students, when they are finishing Wyndham High School, it's that final demonstration. It's what they leave, picking an item of interest that truly shows what they know and they're able to do, what their interests are, but also is another opportunity for them to give back to the community. And we do have 2 communities that have given quite a bit to their students. And before I go any further to even talking about where we are with proficiency-based, I really also wanted to have the opportunity tonight to thank the board members here and also to thank both communities, which I did at our open house the other night, for the upgrade to technology at Wyndham High School. It is already making an impact in classrooms and is already, well, let's just say we actually have a system that's working well. We have computers that's running well. We have students and teachers on the exact same platforms, machines with the same hardware, and things are great. And so we really, really appreciate it. Students appreciate it. Those who have been at Wyndham High School for a number of years really, really, really appreciate the injection of technology that's happened for us.
We really, really get your appreciation.
But I want to start with the picture, and it's a simple picture there of a triangle. And this is the model, and I hope that everyone's had an opportunity to see this model, but it's just kind of a quick review. But it's the model that we've been using to build our proficiency-based diploma. And unlike some places around us, and unlike even some thinking that's happened at the state level, we're not approaching our proficiency-based diploma as a checklist. We are approaching it as a body of evidence that students are accumulating over the 4 years at Wyndham High School. And we're also approaching it that while students are collecting evidence, they're also building the absolute best transcript that they can so that when they leave Wyndham High School, they are as prepared as possible. And as I said, I don't know how many times to students, when you leave, you get to make the choice as to what happens next. We don't want to have somebody else making choices for you based upon a weak transcript. And so we're going with this idea that you're building a transcript, but you're also building a body of evidence that starts from the moment that you walk in the door at Wyndham High School and ends the day that you leave and you walk across that stage and you earn your diploma. And the standards that we're using, great discussion tonight. Standards we're using, combination of national standards, some of which have been adopted at the state level, some of which have not been yet adopted, and in areas where they've not been adopted, we've used main learning results, because currently that's the law of the land. And that's chapter 131. Those law books actually on your desk have a purpose. That's one of the items that's in there describing what that is. 132 are our accountability standards, specifically what we're going to be tested on as far as areas or content areas. But if we start at the very, very top, cross-curricular graduation standards. These are standards that we measure in every single classroom, and we're looking to be measuring in every single classroom. You are all familiar with them. Kate used one tonight, which is the guiding principles. And the second page, which is kind of an off-white page, they're the guiding principles. Those are the cross-curricular standards. Those are the ones that should be measured in every single classroom. And we have a clear and effective communicator, self-directed lifelong learner, creative and practical problem solver, responsible involved citizen, and integrative and informed thinker. In fact, if you look at Maine statute holds up these items as being more important than all the content stuff that happens over 13 years of a child's schooling. Because really the laws about those 8 content areas are to support students being able to acquire those skills. So those cross-curricular graduation standards, within the model that we're using for a proficiency-based diploma, we're going to be measuring all 5 of those standards in all content areas. And students will be collecting evidence, electronic, through either jump rope, through a portfolio, through other pieces, but collecting evidence to show, here is how I'm demonstrating each of those 5 standards along the way. If you go down to the next tier, content area graduation standards. Those are the 8 content areas, and we have spent a tremendous amount of time as a building identifying what our graduation standards are going to be. Most of them match some exemplars. There are some areas, though, that we didn't quite agree, and so we didn't. And we did what's going to actually fit best for us. So we have those cross-content graduation standards, and within that we have performance indicators that says, you know what, this is what it actually means to meet this standard. And we are in the process right now for all those performance indicators, determining what does it actually look like to meet that. And we are in the process of writing rubrics, which are measurement guides, to say here's what it actually means to meet this. And then we are working backwards to all the different curriculum units that we've done over the years and embedding what are the opportunities to learn, what are the opportunities to measure, to ensure that, you know what, we're actually teaching what we said we're going to measure. The other thing that also ensures is that all kids, when they receive a Wyndham High School diploma, that we can guarantee that they've had the opportunity to learn, but that there's also a basic level of understanding, minimal level, that we can say to anybody who gets a Wyndham High School diploma that, yes, you know what, you've earned this. So the process of looking at those cross-curricular and content standards is a large process of certification. And I'll go back to, it's 4 years of collecting evidence over time to say, yes, you've met that. And you know, it may be, you know, one of the questions I received, can a student meet a standard 9th grade year? Absolutely. But guess what? That 9th grade standard is only partially meeting a senior standard. But guess what? You're on your way. You're on your way to being able to meet the standards that you are. And then if we go down a little further, we have content area or course level performance indicators. And that goes back to the idea, you know what, all these things are embedded within courses that we're then using to build a transcript. So how does all of this impact, or how does all of this connect to a capstone project? And you know, we've had some individuals at the high school have had the opportunity to sit down and really look at what would we like to see as a capstone project. And I wrote down some bullets here of some things that I just wanted to go through, some pieces of our thinking. You know, currently right now in policy, our graduation policy does not mention whatsoever a capstone project. It's not a requirement to graduate from Wyndham High School. 22 credits, 40 hours of community service. And as long as an adult is signing off for any community service, if you help Mr. Prince across the street, you can get somebody to sign off on that, you get community service hours. That's the bar that's been set currently for community service. And that has been around, I think, since 2005. And we have students who might go from helping Mr. Prince across the street to heading to Guatemala to work with orphan students. And so we have a wide range of where things currently fall within. But all the policy says is that all students will have 40 hours of community service. So what we're hoping, or what we're proposing as we work through graduation policy, is the introduction of a capstone. Because we think it's important that as students are collecting evidence, that part of that evidence collection is that they have an opportunity, or an additional opportunity, to, number one, pick a topic of interest, something that they are really super excited about, to use that to demonstrate guiding principles, whatever ones that they feel strongly on, or in the cases of some students, if they haven't collected a huge amount of evidence along the way, maybe they want to target or focus a specific one. But then also use that project, that capstone project, as a way to give back to the community. And so with that student having the opportunity to plan with an advisor, how can I use my learning, or what I've learned, to help somebody in the community, to help somebody within the RSU, to really put that new piece of learning into action. So in order to even approach a policy like that, or to have as it be a requirement, it's got to be put into policy. And so as we start to tackle the new graduation policy, one thing I would like to see is that we have that addition of a capstone project with starting to add some parameters for the purposes of collecting evidence for students to show that they've demonstrated those guiding principles. So some bullets here. Some things that from our thinking, and we've modeled this after a couple different schools that we've taken a look at for some of their projects. First of all, I think a capstone project should have something that's of personal interest. If I'm going to have an additional thing that's going to be going on outside of my classes, it should be something that I truly want to be invested in and truly have an interest. And I know for some of our students that may take a little bit of creativity to help them work as far as how are we going to really stretch this out and make it something so it's actually a project and not an activity. But I think it's a piece that, if we're going to spend a year doing this or some time working on this, that it should be that piece of personal interest. Second bullet there, capstone would provide an additional opportunity for students to provide evidence towards meeting the standard for the guiding principles. You have all 5 guiding principles there. As a staff this year, we're going to be developing 5 rubrics for guiding principles. One broad, one for each. 2 purposes, one for our proficiency-based diploma, and also coming down the road in 2017 is accreditation. And one of the elements of accreditation is that you have civic, academic, and social standards that you're measuring across classrooms. Guess what? Those are guiding principles. And that's really what we'd be doing. So we're supporting something we've got to do anyway, something we've got to incorporate anyway, but making it actually something that's attached to the work we want to do. So some additional things here. With an advisor chosen by the student, I think really this should be student-driven. Each student will work through a 1-year planning process for the project. I see something like this starting end of junior year. Students choosing an advisor, students starting to identify, here's something that I think I want to work on, and having the opportunity to sit down with somebody to really talk out what that might look like. And so part of that process, topic of study for the project for approval, some check-ins with an advisor for the timeline, working with a student for developing a community service focus. And then I also think it's important because one of the key ones here, and again I'll go back to you, Kate, clear and effective communicator. I think it's important that all of our students have the opportunity to then share what they've learned and have the opportunity to present that. And so one of the things we've discussed at the high school, could this possibly take the place during that last bit in May, June of senior finals? And instead of taking finals, seniors are sitting with their peers and a panel and presenting what they've done. But more importantly, and this is where I think it's attached to the community service, more importantly showing how they made a difference with their new piece of learning. And we've kind of struggled with, can you take all pieces of learning and somehow tie that back to the community? And you know what? I think we can. I think with a little creativity and a little bit of discussion, I think it's possible to do that. And so one of the discussions I think that you're going to have as a board is right now you have a 40-hour community service requirement. And one of the questions to ask is that, do we stay with 40 hours? Or do we say that 20 is going to be student choice and 20 is going to be towards a capstone? Or do you say we want 10 and 30? These are some things that are going to be discussed, I'm assuming, in policy. And I think there's some things that we're going to have some public discussions, and you public discussion as a board, to determine where exactly that you fall. But I see it being a key component of students being able to demonstrate and students be able to share their evidence to say, you know what, I've met the guiding principles, I've met my content standards, I've demonstrated the performance indicators, I'm ready for my diploma. So that's where we are right now. That's our thinking. That's what we've been discussing to date, and just questions that you might have.
Chris, what's your timeline right now that you're hoping for to have something like this in place?
Well, right now we have a timeline for a proficiency-based diploma working to 2020. If this is something we want to push up sooner, we'd be open to that, but it would require a change to graduation policy. That might be, and this might be one way to approach it, which I'm sure we'll have the discussion in policy. Are there some things that we want to bring on board earlier and not wait until we hit that final point? We would be prepared to go earlier, but right now that graduation policy is aiming towards a 2020 or 2019 date for that first set of proficiency-based diplomas.
Is there any way to lead into this? I know what you're saying with the 2020 proficiency base, but is there a way to lead into this with the possibility of changing that community service piece of it so it encompasses a little bit of it? You're standing up there grinning at me.
Absolutely.
You're already thinking it. You already discussed it, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of those things that would have to change in policy. And so one question that I would have as we look at policy, is that something we want to do? I mean, we've had policies, graduation policies in the past, which have said this class is going to bring on this class is going to bring on this, and then we'll be fully engaged at this particular point. That might be something that we want to take a look at.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I bring it up is since I've been on the board, and I think it was just before I came on the board, that was a pretty contentious conversation amongst the board, that 40 hours. I remember that, see? That 40 hours of community service, and and even at that point in time, I don't think everybody was in total agreement as to what it should look like, and I think we've had conversations since then with different board configurations as to that, something needed to be done with this, but there just never was anything that came forward to take the place or be an option. So I think it's definitely a good thing, that piece of it anyway, which I know you guys are already talking about phasing it in. Yes, Kate?
Yes, you're right. There was a lot of discussion about the community service, and I think your point, your first example, and I'm certainly not going to beat that dead horse, but I could, but your point about community service in 40 hours, your example, your very first example of what would qualify perhaps as a community service would be walking Mr. Prince across the street.
Walking across the street. Work is sad.
Because in actuality, just about anything can qualify for community service if you put enough spin on it. So that has always been my concern, that it's really not educationally based, and it's not meaningful necessarily for some students. That's not to say there weren't, and there are, and there's probably one sitting here who have had, a bazillion hours that have made a tremendous impact on both communities, but I see a need for tightening that up. My one major question for you, since we're working with great schools partnerships and reviewing exemplar schools, et cetera, I'm familiar with other schools that do capstone projects. I'm interested, do those capstone projects embed community service in them?
It's actually, there's a mix.
There is?
Some do and some don't. Most, if not all, have some component that are with student choice. Some have very rigorous writing components that go with them. Others go to simple as there's no write-up, there's no connection, it's just a quick student presentation that happens during that senior week. I think what I'm envisioning is something that's in the middle. But I think it's important that we don't lose the student choice. I also think that it's important that I've learned so much as a student about this topic that I want to do something about it. And I think it's important that that is the element that we look to take with students and really push them towards, instead of this becomes just this bear on their back that it just becomes almost a 4-letter word, that the capstone. We want this to be something that students are looking forward to, they're excited about, there's that level of the personal interest, but then also that level of that idea of, you know what, I really want to do something about this. And I think it's also important that students have that choice of picking who they work with on their capstone. And I'd love it even if we could extend beyond Wyndham High School to, if there's an adult in the community that they want to choose to be their capstone advisor, with some parameters and some things, that they'd have that opportunity to be able to pick that person. But I think it gets to the idea, which, and I remember quite vividly the debate about community service, to have community service that I think has more of a service learning part to it, instead of just doing something for doing the hours to it.
Right.
Which is, I'm actually going to learn something not only about myself but my community through that service learning by doing this project.
I'm actually thinking, and I'm just talking out loud because I know that we're soon to sit down as a policy committee with Angela Hardy, yes, to just get an overview of the different policies that are implicated. But from a board perspective, it seems like, this can't be a directive from policy. This has to come first with a workshop from the board and getting discussion from you guys on what you value and what you think about the capstone, and then potentially having a public forum and get some input from parents and get some input from students and student council or however. Because I think before it's wise to craft a policy, we have to have all of those pieces so that we can do the bidding. We synthesize all this information, and now what do we want the policy to look like based on what the board says, what you say, the community, parents. This is a big change, and we just want to do it right.
Be interested to see how this proceeds. I'm very supportive of it. How did the faculty see it, the teachers and their time? Have you had much discussion with them, or maybe they could be a part of a workshop? Some people could come and talk yay and nay to how they see this?
I think it would be great, first of all, to get the voices here to talk a little bit about that. We've talked about it quite a bit as we've really discussed how are we going to measure guiding principles and measure them well. And yes, we'll be developing rubrics this year that will apply across all content areas, and we'll be working so that every class is then giving feedback to students about that. But in addition, we thought it was important that students, as they go through and as the evidence gets collected further and further along, that this is that one last additional opportunity for students to then demonstrate some of these things if they feel like they haven't demonstrated along the way. Or for those that have, it's an additional opportunity for them to show whoever they're going to after they leave us, look what I can do as a learner. But I think the discussion of the faculty was, can we keep it at the guiding principle level? And can we also keep it to the level where it just doesn't become so huge that it becomes overbearing, difficult to manage, and just doesn't become one more thing that need to do. It's truly something that as a community, that it's something that we embrace, and it's something that we look forward to.
Yep.
And I think we also have to do that for students, because we just can't do it because we want to do a capstone. you know what, there needs to be a piece for students, which is, you know, I'm just going to speak myself personally. If I had to do community service, I would rather do it on something that was really a personal interest that I could share and I'm learning something than, you know what, Ms. Gavoni said I got to do community service, so go somebody sign some slips.
You know, in line with talking about the faculty, when we look at community service, it's not any extra work for the faculty. I mean, they just go do it, they bring their slip of paper in by whomever. sign it.
The faculty doesn't actually even really see it.
No, I know, it just goes into the
And
little
Infinite
into the
Campus
little bucket. So I think this would have to have a major buy-in by faculty, because I think this is going to put an awful lot of extra work on the faculty. Not, you know, I mean, there's the advisors, but I get a funny feeling that there's just no way that a student's going to be able to do this without drawing some of their teachers in for assistance, you know.
And I think part of that also, Marge, is, you know, we've talked a lot about management. Do we cut off the number of students that an advisor is expecting to do? You know, and part of this is that as we're transitioning from 9 to 10 to 11, 12, you know, part of this is also transitioning to, as your advisor, this isn't my project. I'm here as somebody who can give you some advice and give you some ideas and some things that maybe you haven't thought about, but this is yours. I'm willing to help you. I'm willing to do those ideas. You know, I think the other thing that it does for us is that, you know, we have typically 250 seniors. We have 75 teachers plus another 30 or so support staff that are in that building. You know, a student can pick anybody. I mean, I would love to have some students that I worked with on their capstone projects. I would really find that of great interest, to be able to support and work through the timelines. So it's just some management things that also we would need to figure out. But it's getting to that point where it's using an advisor truly as an advisor and not as somebody who's responsible for grading the work.
Good. One more. The way this timeline reads is basically that at the end of their junior year, they're selecting what their project is going to be, and all I keep thinking of is community service hours. That when you get to the end of your senior year, the staff is running all over the place trying to find community service hours for these students to go get their community service hours in. So I guess, you know, and is that the norm for anybody who is doing the capstone project, that nothing really happens till the end of your junior year? I'm just thinking that, you know, should there be a lead-in to that for the students?
Yep.
You know, earlier, you know, like at the beginning of the junior year, so they have time to think about it.
I mean, we've read projects that have started as early as junior year with just some simple milestone steps, and we've also observed some ones that start, you know, kind of partway into the first semester for senior year. And I guess it depends on, you know, the breadth of the project, what they're doing, what the expectations are. You know, and part of this is also, if it's a graduation requirement, it is something that all students will need to be able to do and demonstrate in order for you as a board to say that I can give them a diploma. So we also need to think about, you know, how do we engage all students and make this to a point where you know, it's going to be that level of interest. And we talk about staff buy-in, Marge. I think one of the most important buy-ins, though, are students.
Sure.
I think Peter was first.
Yeah, mine kind of went along with Marge, which was, in the way that you're envisioning this, when would an advisor be assigned to a student, or when would a student get to choose an advisor? We talking junior year, senior year?
Well, and part of this is, anytime you make a change like this, it's got to be adapted into your culture. And first time around, we're going to have students who probably won't think about it, and then when the time of the deadline comes and it gets rolled out, it will be a busy week. Kids will be going to their advisors. You know, something like this gets into a culture and then starts to then develop, much like even with college recommendations now, that we've pushed those back to students asking in May of their junior year. Some students ask earlier than that. And I think the same thing would happen, is that as students got into especially some of our very organized students, may get into their end of their sophomore year. They may be finding an advisor for their senior year to say, you know what, I'm thinking about this for a project. Would you be my advisor for this? But really putting this onto the student. And, you know, then our tracking might be, instead of tracking community service hours, we're tracking to make sure that every student has selected an advisor and has turned in their capstone sheet. And then we'll also have to have the conversation. We've got a student who moves in partway through their senior year and we're accepting credits in. Do they do it? Do they not do it? But, you know, if this is something we're thinking of doing, depending on the timeline, you know, my suggestion would be that we would pick either a freshman or sophomore class and say, this is coming. Understand, you've got a year out, you've got 2 years out. You know, start thinking about some things that you want to do. But I think the other part of that has to be what's going to go from current policy to support that. Because I'm not here tonight suggesting that we keep 40 hours of community service and on top of that, that we add the capstone. I think it's a piece that somehow we make the two connected to one another.
Actually, I think it's a great idea, and I'm all for it. But my concern would be, as somebody on the dropout committee, where would we be prepared to say, you know what, you've met your proficiencies, you don't have a lot of support structure, you know, in their life. Are we going to say, no, you don't graduate based on that? And would there be support from the school for those that don't have the support in their life?
Absolutely, and I think a lot of those supports happen quietly now with students who, and right now we're in a credit-based system and we're in a community service hours-based district. There's a lot of conversations that happen with students, especially with even juniors and seniors now, for when they're looking on their next 2 years that no one ever knows about, and supports are put into place and those things, and then, you know, we start running community service hour list just 1st of December, and we start meeting with students to look at ideas and opportunities. And so, yes, absolutely, we want to make sure that those supports are in place, much like we start credit checks junior year, making sure that students have necessary courses and those supports are in place.
So at close to June, do a lot of people show up at his office to walk?
There's we. I think one of the reasons we have a graduation rate to the level that it is that we're fortunate as communities to have people who are working at the high school who really will start digging in very, very early to make sure that those students have opportunity to meet those requirements in enough time. There's a lot of people who it takes to make that happen. With that concern to say, you know, what becomes an issue though, and I think what you're getting to for dropout prevention is that kids who never ever really reach their junior or senior year, they're stuck at that perpetual freshman level, sophomore level. Those are the ones I think that we start to see that don't finish.
That might be a good enticement though for them to finish if you could find something they were interested in and they could start their project.
Well, it sounds like they'd have a ways to go
Or
for
something.
that process. I
But
figured you
anyway.
had thought of those,
Yeah.
you see what goes on in the school.
Carrie?
What are the next steps you need from us? I mean, this is great, but is it working with policy at this point and working with Kate?
Okay.
Which might be, the next step is like policy to
See,
talk about options?
Policy is key, but I think policy works best if we have input from you guys. What is your direction? And then we can craft the policy. So maybe, you know, have a workshop. What do we value as a board? What do we want the capstone to look like? What is our feeling about community service? How many hours do we want it? Don't we want it? And then, once we reach consensus, the policy committee can then, with the help of a lot of other people, believe me, put together a draft, and then we'll hash it out again.
Okay.
And see if all of the constituents that, you know, the stakeholders think it's a good gig.
Sounds good.
And I think as part of that, we could also provide what an application might look like, We've got some samples that we've been working on, so we're more than happy to provide that to help with the discussion. I think for tonight, though, I just wanted to provide that overview and that kind of spirit of what we're looking for.
When you say application, what do you mean?
Well, eventually it's going to get to a point where little Chris Howell is going to need to submit something to say, here's what my capstone project's going to be.
Oh, right.
And I'm going to need to have somebody to sign off on the fact that, yes, I've planned it, here's what I'm looking to do, a rough outline of what my project's going to look like, those pieces.
So is there going to be, capstone to me, it seems big, and if I was a student, I would be like, the eyes would glow. It's like, oh my gosh, another thing. Is there going to be a template? There will be.
Yes.
So there's rubrics, templates, expectations, that's all going to be laid out for the students. So really, in essence, I'm pretty pumped up if it all goes well, because I think for a lot of students, and maybe even for a lot of the ones that you're discussing, this is really self-directed. I would love for the culture to change, that students are like absolutely over the moon about learning and absolutely over the moon about having a project that they're passionate about and then presenting it, because then they're in the driver's seat. Right now, they're in the driver's seat for the pace, but the content is given to them. And this is their gig, and I really love that. So thank you.
I think the other piece is, we talked about the high school staff, but I can also see students saying, I want my third grade teacher, I want to work with her again, and maybe she can be my advisor. So think about all the people that have affected those students' lives all the way through, that could become the advisor that's not housed at the high school, but an opportunity to connect with an adult and do a project with.
I also think it's really such a fabulous opportunity for us as a school district to really reach out into the community and get support from community members to be advisors. And that would be just a fabulous partnership for students and for us. And for the community to really feel engaged in our graduates.
I think it creates a great mentoring program, too.
And there are several places that will do a capstone fair where students are all in a gym with a desk, and it's an opportunity for them to basically, like a booth system,
Yeah, that'd be fun.
to share, here's what I did, here's what I worked on, here's what I learned, here's how I impacted. And some of our students, depending upon what they're thinking about for a vocation, it's also a great opportunity to learn about that vocation. Here's what I'm thinking about doing, and it's an opportunity to learn, maybe go practice it a little bit, and then report out, here's how I made a difference.
It makes me think of an Eagle Scout project.
Yeah.
It really does. From the ones I've dealt with, it's kind of like, and you know what? They really get hyped up because it's theirs. It's theirs. They're the supervisor. There's just nobody else. Does anybody else have another question for Chris? You all set?
Thank you, Chris. Nice job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great as usual. Okay. Moving on, number 9, appointments. We'll take a motion.
I move to approve the appointment of the following employee for the 2014-15 school year: Sally Plummer, speech and language therapist at RES and JSMS.
Second. There's a first and a second. This is a replacement?
Yes.
Okay. All those any questions from the board? All those in favor? It's unanimous.
Thank you.
See them. The next item is report of the secretary. If I could have a motion.
I move to approve the minutes of the September 3rd, 2014 meeting.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Is there any questions? Comments? Okay, all those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. All righty. Okay, now, I guess this is only going to apply to the folks who are going to the conference. We have to elect, for the Maine School Boards Association annual, we need a delegate and an alternate. So I guess first if we could, for show of hands as to who's even going to this.
Going Thursday only. I don't know.
It's on Thursday, isn't it? These meetings?
It's Thursday, not Friday.
No, the vote.
Oh, the vote. Oh, I don't remember.
I think
It's
the vote is
usually
on,
the Thursday.
is Friday. I think it's on Friday because it used to be Mike and I used to ride up with him and I always had to wait for him to come
On
out of
Friday?
there to leave on Friday. So I'm really not sure. So why don't we just stick with who's going for 2 days?
I know I'm Thursday, I'm not 100% positive about Friday, so I'll take myself off.
So there's the three of us.
Okay.
But anyway, if somebody could make a motion, we'll go from there.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Does anybody want to do this? Or does anybody not want to do this?
Well, I think it's a necessary evil. I think
Oh.
somebody has to do it.
I understand, but if there's someone who's really chomping,
I don't think any of us are chopping, but
Okay.
if need be, I mean, I would take it.
you all will serve. I understand. Okay.
So I could have that motion from anyone.
I move to appoint Marge Gavoni as the RSU 14 School Board Delegate to the Delegate Assembly of the Maine School Boards Association.
Second.
Is there any questions? All those in favor? I move to appoint Kate Briggs as the RSU 14 School Board Alternate Delegate to the Delegate Assembly of the Maine School Boards Association.
I second.
All those in favor? It's unanimous. So we have a delegate and an alternate. Okay, we are, next on the agenda is an update on the cost sharing formula. John Davis, our Assistant Superintendent, will give us an update on that. Mr. Davis.
Happy to do that, thank you very much. As some of the public may know, and I just want to make sure that everybody does know, is that the school board early in September did create an advisory committee called the Cost Sharing Formula Subcommittee. The membership on that is split between the two communities, if you will. Jerry Keene Dreyer from Raymond, Kate Bricks from Wyndham, Diana Freusland from Raymond, Jennifer Fleck from Wyndham, and the chair asked me to chair this particular subcommittee, so I'm happy to give this report. And to let you know that we've already met for about 2.5 hours on September 10th. I thought the meeting was very productive, a lot of good thinking there, and some marching orders. And so I think I'm going to talk to process before I get into kind of the nitty-gritty of what is happening, and that is really to speak to you about the fact that the will and the heart of the group was that what they'd like to do is proceed in a concerted, thoughtful and thorough manner, but yet on a fast track, which is to say, we know that there will likely be a referendum that in Raymond that speaks to this matter, and as a result of that, the feeling of the group was to meet as often as we could in October to get information out in such a way that the Raymond public could be well informed about what some of the financial ramifications of this action might look like. So as a result of that, again, process-wise, on October 7th, there's a meeting of the subcommittee, 5:30 to 7:30, as well as October 21st, in the district office, mainly because oftentimes I'm asked to get resources for the group, and that's where the resources are. So that was the purpose for having it in the district office. And so with that, as the calendar moves, and to the extent that things move along with the school board, you would be asked to bring this matter up at a January 7th, 2015 school board meeting, where you would have to take action that you would like to proceed, which would put in play the need for a public hearing which would be held on February 11th. To the extent, again, that things are moving along in the affirmative to change the formula, then prior to April 2nd, you would need to call a district-wide meeting, which is akin, similar to your budget meeting. So it would be properly noticed and widely communicated that that would be a district-wide meeting for the communities as a whole to come in and determine whether or not they agreed with the recommendation of the school board to change the formula. So that's the process. So there's some timelines to be met. I also will let you know that the committee was in a place where, regardless of what they learn in November, are still going to proceed with what they think is fair. So let's just go to sort of the darker side, if you will, which is, let's say that Raymond determines that they would like to withdraw from the RSU. The formula group will continue to meet with this particular schedule because withdrawal itself takes up to 2 years, as we've learned from the attorney, and people want to be fair in terms of what taxation may look like in any event. So I think that's kind of a notable thing, and I appreciate the committee's will on that. So that's where we are in terms of the actual process. But now let me tell you a little bit about the nitty-gritty of this thing. You're going to become quite familiar with some forms, and one is called the ED 279, which is from the state of Maine, Department of Education, which is called the Unit Allocation of Funds to Local SAUs, School Administrative Units. And it's customized to each community, or RSU in this case. So we'll have that we're going to be becoming very familiar with, as well as another document that's called the Community Assessments, and that is the one that is utilized based on the certificate of organization of this RSU to proceed with how each community is billed for the expenses of this district. So there's a couple of things that we'll be looking at. The important part, I think, to speak to is that from the state of Maine, the essential programs and services funding formula model is not anything that is in the purview of the RSU or this committee to look at. We don't have any influence on what the legislature has set aside as how schools are funded in the state of Maine. So when you really kind of distill this thing, what you're looking at is the component of the formula that is for the local additional. And so in this community, our RSU, we have local additional expenses because the state does not fully fund our educational programming that is paid for by the two communities, as well as adult education. And another component that will come into play is how the unallocated fund balances of the district is used in terms of when we use those to reduce taxation. So there's three really kind of components to the local formula that will be reviewed in great detail. So with that, what we've learned is a few things. So I was able to gather some data. Yes?
I just want to add that also debt service was one of the components as well, I believe.
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
Yeah.
just
Actually, let's stay with that for a moment so that I don't forget that. That's exactly right. So there has been some confusion in the public relative to the formula, and that, let me clarify that. So there already is in the formula a segment that does delineate how debt service will be paid. Generally speaking, when the district was devised, it was that each community who had the debt already, so RES is under debt, Wyndham High School is under debt, Manchester's under debt, those communities would continue to pay for that debt separately from the RSU. The change in that was custom was that because there was no longer going to be an agreement for a high school of record for Raymond, because now they're part of the district, that they would pick up the local-only component based on what I call capitation, but it's enrollment. So to the extent, this is hypothetical, that there's 1,000 kids in the Wyndham High School, of which 200 are Raymond students, then 20% of that debt service payment for the local only would be paid for by the community of Raymond. So thank you for that. The other piece to that we don't have in a place where we even have a recommendation is, but we'll be looking at, is that there are other components to buildings that don't necessarily mean debt service. So there's capital improvements, if you will, that are very expensive that don't go to bond, that you're paying for either through lease purchase or direct payment from the budget, that we need to consider as we think about devising the formula. So, yes.
In the original articles of incorporation, or whatever they are, I mean, does it speak specifically to in the future if a building was to be made, how the debt service would be?
No, it doesn't. And my point really was to say that clearly, if you could devise it then, you can devise a custom formula now for that situation as well.
All right, so that specifically wasn't addressed. It was just whatever debt was existing
Right.
at the time.
Right. But what I'm thinking is that there would be an opportunity for the group to look at this and make a recommendation that would be more of a blanket situation so that both communities would be comfortable with how the debt service was handled for new debt, not for the old debt. So we'll continue down that road. So now kind of digressing a bit, so what's going on in the state of Maine? What we've learned really is that people are looking at two things, which is the fiscal capacity and subsidizable students. And that is clearly communicated in the ED 279 and makes it irrefutable, if you will, so that to the extent that the communities, wherever you are, receive your ED 279, it says you have X amount of students, some attributed to Raymond and some attributed to Wyndham. That form's going to come every year with that. So that's the subsidizable pupil piece. The other piece, the fiscal capacity, right or wrong, is based on assessed valuations of the community and is, again, irrefutable because that comes from the state of Maine, from gathered data that they receive from the communities. So most districts are using those two kind of bellwethers to determine what the formula is going to look like. And it's kind of all over the place, sort of. So what I mean by that is some districts are going strictly by the evaluation, some are going strictly by pupil, some are splitting that up. It could be 90% valuation, 10% kids. It could be 50-50. So, just kind of, think that through. I mean, there's quite a few permutations of how that might look to the extent that you want to be fair. And so a lot of what we talked about is kind of backing into something that's fair, trying the formula out to make sure that it looks like it would be a fair process. So the other thing that has gained some legs even already early on with the group is this notion that what you might want to do, because others have done this, is to take a 3-year rolling average of what it was. So a 3-year, what was the assessed valuation 3 years in a row, add it all up, divide by 3, what was the population, add them together, times 3 divided by 3, so that there's not a cliff if there's some big drop in enrollment or some big spike in enrollment, or that the community loses a business and the assessed values tank, whatever might happen. So there's all kinds of things we can have a lot of fun with trying to figure out how this is going to work, and we're on it. And so other things that we've looked at is how would we look at it if we were no longer a school system, and if you were Wyndham, you were responsible for the revenues and expenses, and if you were Raymond, revenue and expenses. So there is a way to look at that, which is we know what the communities were 6 years ago because they were separate, they were departments, and so we know that the budgets were X and X. And so you can take any number of, models, financial models. What we talked about was, what was the cost of living or inflation over those period of years, and just build it that way. So we're looking at that. The other thing is to look at the per pupil expenses, very specific to the buildings, so that you could take the building, you could take that expense of that building, and you could divide it by the pupils in the building. So who's paying what for students, to start to look at that as, again, a financial model to try to make things fair. Other complicating factors are choice in Raymond and charter in the district. And we will be looking at that to make sure that we're fair in the manner in which that formulas devised for that. So an awful lot going on. And before I forget, one thing we did want to get a head nod on, you may have questions which I'm happy to answer, but was that we kind of neglected to, in our mission, if you will, speak to the revenue side. It was implied in my view, but when we talked about it, it doesn't say revenue and expenses. We just want to be really clear that the revenue's as important as the expenses to what might happen to the formula, and just need the board to know that that's what we'll be bringing, both sides of that equation.
Any other head nod? Do we agree? Yes. Okay, you have a head nod.
Thank you. I know it's a lot to kind of absorb, but are there questions or are there things you want to know about? Guidance? Okay. Well, you know, I hope to have some modeling ready for that team, if not the end of this week, the very first part of next week, so we can start to have that information prior to the next meeting, which is, as I said, on the 7th. So we'll try to get some of that out, and we'll just keep plugging.
That's great. Thank you. That was pretty thorough.
All right.
I wasn't
You're
there,
welcome.
but it was pretty thorough. Before we adjourn, just so everybody knows, October 1st, we'll start doing our committee reports again. Because by then, hopefully, most committees have met. What you'll probably see on the agenda will probably just be the, facilities, finance, policy. But if you've had a committee meeting at that time, you can present yours. Diana, that would be, and you can talk to Mr. Howell. I spoke to him earlier. I wasn't sure if you were coming, but I think it would be great if we could put you into that pool, so you can kind of bring your thoughts, your feelings, and what you've heard, and what the rest of the students would like for the board to hear. So you can also have an opportunity to report out to us there, okay?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, great. Okay, saying that.
I have a question.
You certainly
I
can.
might know that, I don't know if Chris mentioned, but Christine did about Jumpstart, which is the new system for, and I don't have a child in the school any longer, so I just don't know if at some point we could get a small presentation, or I could go to a school, I suppose, about just how Jumpstart works and how it's being used.
She can, I think she probably can. Christine is going to come back, well, just like Chris used to. I'm sure she'll be here frequently, because she's also going to come in on the kindergarten program that she ran in the summer. So at that time, we can
It doesn't need to be more than
probably
5
have
or
her-
10, nothing long. I just would like to visually see what it looks like and how it's different, and how parents, if parents had questions for me, I'd at least had laid my eyes upon it and had a little bit of an idea. So that'd be great.
It's really great. Have you seen it?
No, I haven't either,
It is
so-
cool.
well, that's
Only
why
because
it
I
would
was in
be-
her office
well,
and she
that would
showed me.
be-
It is great.
Okay, that'd
It
be
is
great.
great.
I'd appreciate that.
Have it
Thanks.
available at open house for us to see.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was good.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, she can- Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Do you have a second?
Do you need a
I'll
second?
give it to you.